Have you ever wondered what God could do with you? Now, most of you, whenever people began to ask you about what you can do for God or how God might be able to use you, you begin telling stories about what you can't do. You don't focus on the positive aspect of what you can do in life as a whole. In chapter 3, God found Moses on the backside of the desert. He was tending sheep out there, and he had only one thing in his hand, and that was a shepherd's staff. Something that might have looked a little bit like this. This is kind of a prized possession of mine. This was given to me by a gentleman who tended sheep and worked sheep. And I was his pastor for a while. And he said, "Pastor, you're a shepherd, so I want you to have a shepherd's crook." Now, you know, you can do a lot of things with this. Now, I can't reach you quite here, but you know, you can reach out and get people with those. You know, the shepherd would get them. Every now and then when they're not doing right, you can turn this in, you can poke them with it a little bit. You know, so there's a lot of things. And a few, you might want to, no, I didn't want to do that. Okay, with it, you know. But a shepherd's staff is an interesting thing, isn't it? You know, it's kind of a unique thing, and it's been, and I believe, if I remember what the gentleman told me, this one actually came from Wales, where oftentimes a lot of sheep are at, and they do that. But what God was doing with Moses was he said, "Moses, I've got a job for you. I've got something I want you to do." But what Moses' reaction was is, "Hey, God, I don't have anything. I don't know how I can do anything you want me to do. God, you gave me a chance and you brought me up in the house of Pharaoh as one of his actual grandson. I mean, you were here. I had everything. I had the power, and your people were there. And God, I know you wanted to use me, but, you know, God, I got mad about it. I did something I shouldn't have done." Now, what happened? The difference between Moses and the Baptist just goes home and sits down. You know. Or they say, "Well, I can't do it the way I want to," or if they didn't work, or somebody said something about the way I did anything. "Yeah, I'll just quit." Well, Moses didn't get to quit, because the reality is that God still had use for him, and so does you, whoever you are. And it doesn't amount to what you have in your hand that will determine what you can do. It's what you have in your heart that makes all the difference in the world, isn't it? So you know what Moses did? God showed Moses that he could use him even in difficult circumstances. When I think about this, I think of some wonderful stories in the Scripture. I want you to just take a picture with me this morning as Jackie read our Scripture to us this morning. And what did we find? We found Moses, and he was on the backside of the desert. I love that passage of Scripture. And you know why he was there? He had committed murder. He saw one of the children of Israel being abused, and his righteous indignation came in him, and you know, he literally, you know, killed someone. You say, "Well, wow, that's a terrible thing, isn't it?" God couldn't use him, but you say God had been preparing him. And the reality is the only thing that God can't overcome is your unwillingness to be used by him. There's nothing in your life that can happen. Now, there's some things that may disqualify you for certain things, but the reality is, folks, that God has a plan for you, and he had a plan for Moses. You say, "Well, I don't have anything to offer." Do you understand that Moses had left everything behind? He was on the backside of the desert. He had no material possessions. He wasn't even tending his own sheep, folks. He was tending his father-in-law's sheep. And he was out there, and I love that, you know, when it says the backside of the desert, I think about that. Now, I grew up in the hills of Tennessee, and you all realize that. And I've been in some places down in those mountains and stuff where I thought, you know, I don't know how anybody ever lived back in here. But every now and then when you do that, and you can do that in eastern Kentucky, and I've been in southwest Virginia, and you can find them there too, and I'm sure other places. And you get back to places where you think, nobody's back here. I never forget when I was pastoring in southwest Virginia, the first church I pastored. And I got a call one day, and they said, "Listen, one of our members' father has passed away, and can you go up there?" I said, "Sure." I said, "How do you get there?" Well, they told me it's kind of like in eastern Kentucky, they told me what creeks to follow. So I followed those creeks, and I finally came, they said, you go up to this road. And I came up to this road, and this small asphalt road turned into a gravel road. The gravel road then began to turn into a less graveled road, and then there was a sign there, it said, end of road maintenance. And there was another little trail out through there, which I had seen before in my life, and I went out through there. And finally I saw this house in the woods up on the hill, and some cars were parked down here. So I got there and I walked the path up the hill, and that's where they lived. That was kind of like the backside of the desert, isn't it? Where you got to go. You got to be going there to get there. But even out in the backside of the desert, there because of his disobedience, there because he was running from Pharaoh, there because he didn't know what else to do, God had placed him. And you know what God did when he placed him out there? He spoke to him. He spoke to him. And that's what he does with us, didn't he? No material possession. The sheep were his fathers-in-law's. And God said, what you got in your hand, Moses? He said, I've got a staff. I've got a staff. And God looked at him. He said, throw that staff down, Moses. And he threw it on the ground. I'm going to throw this one down just yet. And you know what God did? He turned it into a serpent. And I brought this to show you because, let me tell you what, if you straighten that thing out, it's a long snake. Isn't it? It wasn't no little bitty snake, was it? There were some bad snakes out in those deserts, folks. And he threw that thing down. And he said, go down and get it, Moses. I'm kind of like Wendy Bagwell was. I don't know if that's an old story for some of you. Some of you old timers may remember. It used to be a singing group, and he had a song about snake handling. They said they went to this church, and the snakes boxes started coming out. And one of his buddies said, did you see a back door? He says, no, but wonder where they'd like to have one. It's kind of like that. So one of the guys picked up a snake and brought it over in hand and said, he was hollering in the snake's ear if a snake had ears. And he said, if God told you to pick up this serpent, would you? And he says, he ain't and I ain't. So I don't know. Would I if God led me? Absolutely. And in this case, God told Moses to pick it up, didn't he? So he reached down and he got the serpent. And guess what? The serpent turned back into his staff. And God says, I want you to be the shepherd of my people. I want you to go get my people out. And I want you to tell Pharaoh some things. And he did. And what amazing things. Because the thing that is the most incredible part of that story is not the fact that Moses was on the backside of the desert. Not that he had a shepherd's staff. Not that he threw it down and it became a serpent. Not even that he picked it up and it became a staff again. The most amazing thing in that story to me is that when Moses heard God's voice, he listened and did exactly what he said. How about that? He did that. He did that. He had all kinds of excuses. He talked about no ability, no message, no authority, no eloquence. Nothing. But yet he did what God asked him to do. And he listened to God. Now, has God ever done anything like that before? Well, yeah. It is all about our availability to God, because there was a multitude of folks up in Galilee, and they were hungry one day, and Jesus had been teaching, and he told the disciples, hey, they're hungry, and the disciples came and said, they're hungry. We need to send them away and go find something to eat. And God told them that we're going to take care of that through Jesus, didn't he? And so they searched out, and finally they brought a small boy's lunch, and they placed it in the hands of Jesus. And you know what Jesus did with it? He fed the multitudes, at least 5,000 men, plus women and children there. We don't even know how many were there. And you know what? The beautiful thing was he went back and he picked up 12 basketfuls after he got through that. You know why? Because the little boy offered God what he had. He offered God what he had.